A 12-year-old girl, a hospital, and a secret that shook everyone who heard it. What really happened behind those closed doors? In the quiet mist of a rural hospital, on an ordinary Monday morning, the sterile scent of disinfectant mixed with the damp trace of last night's rain drifting in through half-open windows. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor cut through the silence. On one of the beds sat a small girl in a dirt-stained school uniform, clutching her backpack as if it were the only thing anchoring her to this world. She was 12 years old. Her face pale, her eyes swollen red from tears, but she remained disturbingly silent. A middle-aged doctor opened a file slowly. Her hands trembled. She hesitated before whispering words that froze the air in the room. The ultrasound is clear. You are almost 5 months pregnant. The girl lowered her head. She didn't answer. Instead, one hand rested softly on her stomach. And then, in a voice so fragile it was almost a plea, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I don't want him to die." The doctor's chest tightened. "Who was him?" She asked gently. The girl's voice cracked. "He's not my father, but he said I'm the only one he loves." Before the doctor could ask again, a scream echoed from the emergency ward outside. The doctor rushed out. The girl followed slowly, her steps dragging, her eyes glazed as if she were in another world. At the end of the hallway, restrained to a bed, a man thrashed violently, shouting, "Let me out! I have to see her." His eyes were bloodshot, saliva dripping from his mouth. The nurses froze in terror. The doctor demanded, "Who is he?" One nurse whispered, trembling. "He brought the girl here this morning, said he was her uncle, but when he learned she was pregnant, he started screaming. He claimed it's my child." The doctor's heart sank. The girl remained by the doorway, her face blank, her voice hollow. "I told him not to hurt me, but he said pain is love." The doctor noticed the bruises on the child's wrist, finger marks, evidence of hands that had gripped her too tightly. The girl turned and whispered, almost smiling, "I'll be a good mother. I promise." The doctor's legs weakened. Who taught her this? Who made her believe this nightmare was love? Moments later, police officers entered, holding a file and a warrant. One of them whispered urgently to the doctor, "His name is Trey Pop, a fugitive, wanted for child abduction and abuse. He's escaped capture 3 times. The doctor froze. She remembered the file she had read that morning. The guardian name listed for the girl was his. Everything had been planned. The school registration, the lies about being her uncle, the manipulation. And now the girl, barely 12, believed he was her true love. The man laughed, even as he was chained. His voice dripped with arrogance. "She belongs to me, and so does our child. Forever." The corridor fell into suffocating silence. The girl whispered to herself, barely audible, "If I tell the truth, will he hate me?" The doctor grasped her trembling hands. "No, no one should ever hate you for speaking the truth." Tears spilled down the girl's face as she admitted in broken words how he had convinced her the world was cruel, that her mother had abandoned her, and that only he could protect her. She had believed him. She had surrendered everything because she had no one else. The wound in her soul was deeper than anything medicine could heal. Then chaos erupted again. The restrained man bit his tongue, blood gushing onto the floor. As he convulsed, he forced out one final whisper through blood-stained teeth. "Even if I die, our child will live in her forever." The doctor felt the world collapse. Hours later, as his lifeless body was covered with a white sheet, silence weighed over the hospital. But the girl, she stood unmoving. At the window, she laid her hand on her belly and whispered, "It's okay, my child. Your father is gone, but I will raise you in his place." Her voice was calm, too calm, like a child who no longer belonged to this world. The doctor tried to reach her, whispering, "What he did was wrong. You don't have to carry this alone." But the girl shook her head. "No, I chose it. He never forced me. I wanted it." The word wanted sliced through the doctor's heart like a blade. This child didn't even know she was a victim. She had been brainwashed until she believed abuse was love. At that moment, the doors opened. A frail woman entered, eyes swollen with tears. She cried out, "My child, my daughter." The girl froze. She turned slowly. Mother? The woman fell to her knees. I never stopped searching for you. He told me you were dead. He stole you from me. But the girl didn't run to her. She only stared and asked, will you accept his child? The way you once accepted me. The room went silent. The storm outside grew heavier, rain hammering against the windows. The mother begged through tears. Come home with me. Let me care for you. Let me care for the baby, too. The girl's lips quivered. Her small hands trembled on her backpack. Finally, she whispered, I don't want my child to grow up knowing what he was. I don't want my baby to carry that darkness. The doctor knelt beside her. You have a right to choose. From now on, no one, not him, not the past, decides your life. Only you. For the first time, the girl nodded. Slowly, painfully, she stepped into her mother's arms. The storm raged outside, but in that embrace, there was the faintest glimmer of something long lost. Hope. The storm outside showed no sign of calming. Rain lashed against the glass, each drop echoing like a reminder of the chaos that had torn through this small hospital. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting pale shadows that danced across the walls. And in the center of it all, a girl just 12 years old stood trembling in her mother's embrace. Her body was rigid, as if her heart didn't yet trust the warmth she was feeling. The mother clung to her, whispering apologies through sobs that seemed endless. But the girl's eyes, hollow and lost, looked past her mother's shoulder, as if seeing something the others could not. The room was silent, save for the storm and the faint, steady hum of medical machines. The nurses exchanged glances, but said nothing. They knew the truth. This was not a moment that could be fixed with medicine or law. This was a wound far deeper, a wound in the soul. The doctor, standing just a few feet away, tightened her grip on the clipboard in her hands. She had seen suffering before. She had delivered bad news to families. She had told parents their child would not survive. But this was different. This was a child standing at the intersection of innocence and horror, the broken innocence. In documentary style, we must pause. We must ask, how does a 12-year-old come to believe that pain is love? How does a child, barely into adolescence, speak with the certainty of someone who has been convinced their suffering is a choice? Psychologists call it grooming. It is not just abuse of the body. It is abuse of the mind. It is a slow erosion of trust in the outside world until only one voice remains. That voice becomes godlike. That voice rewrites reality. For this girl, that voice belonged to Trape Hop. He had stolen her from her mother years ago. He had isolated her, fed her lies, and bound her to him with chains that could not be seen. Chains of manipulation. And by the time she sat on that hospital bed, those invisible chains were tighter than any set of iron cuffs. She did not believe she was a victim. She believed she was chosen, loved, special. That is what made this case different. And that is what made it terrifying. The hospital as witness. Back in the ward, the body of Trape Hop lay covered under a white sheet. The metallic smell of blood still lingered in the air. His final words seemed to echo in the walls of the hospital. Our child will live inside her forever. It was not only a threat, it was a declaration. A claim of ownership that even death could not erase. The police officers finished their reports in silence. They had seen criminals before, men who lied, cheated, stole. But what they had witnessed here felt less like a crime and more like an invasion of innocence itself. One officer muttered to another, "We'll close the file. He's gone now." But the doctor knew better. His body was gone, yes, but his shadow lived on inside the girl and inside the child she carried. The mother's return. The girl clung to her backpack, even as her mother stroked her hair. She refused to let it go, as if everything she had endured was hidden inside. The mother spoke softly, desperately. "Come home. Please come home with me. Let me protect you now." But the girl whispered back words that sent a shiver through everyone listening. "Will you love his child, too?" Her mother froze. It was the kind of question no parent should ever have to answer. Yet in this moment, it was the only one that mattered. Tears ran down the woman's face. She nodded, choking on her words. Yes, I will, because I love you, And loving you means loving everything that is a part of you. The girl's expression shifted, just slightly. For the first time, her lips trembled, not with fear, not with defiance, but with the faintest glimmer of hope. The doctor closed her eyes. Perhaps, just perhaps, the first brick in those walls of manipulation had cracked, beyond the hospital. But this was not the end. The story of this girl spread quietly through the hospital staff. Nurses whispered about her resilience. Some cried in the break room, unable to hold back their emotions. Others struggled with anger. Anger at the man who had stolen her childhood. Anger at the system that had failed to protect her. For the doctor, there were no easy answers. Healing this girl would not take days or weeks. It would take years. Therapy, support, a rebuilding of trust brick by brick, word by word. And the child she carried? That child would be born into a world already shaped by trauma. The question loomed heavy in the air. Would this new life carry the burden of its father's sins, or would it become a chance for redemption? The voice of the narrator. This is not just the story of one girl. It is a story of how innocence can be stolen in silence, behind closed doors, in places where no one looks. It is a story of how manipulation can twist love into something unrecognizable. It is also the story of resilience, of a mother's return, of a child who, even after years of darkness, still held a small, fragile spark of hope. And as the rain continued to fall outside that hospital, one truth became clear. The fight for this girl's future had only just begun. The storm outside eventually broke into a softer drizzle, but inside the hospital, the air remained heavy. The girl, only 12 years old, stood between two worlds, the one she had been forced to believe and the one she had just been offered by her mother. The nurses whispered. The police officers packed their files, and the doctor stood quietly in the corner. Yet all eyes were on the girl, waiting for her decision. She placed a small hand on her stomach and whispered something only she and the child inside could hear. Then, slowly, she looked up at her mother. Her lips parted, trembling, and she said, "I will go with you, but promise me one thing. Don't let them take him away from me. He may be gone, but I still carry him here." Her mother's tears flowed freely as she nodded, pulling her daughter close. The embrace was not one of resolution, but of survival. Two broken hearts, clinging together, searching for strength where none should exist. The doctor, watching silently, understood that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long, marked by therapy, by pain, by questions that could never be fully answered. But at least, for the first time, the girl was no longer alone. And so, as the hospital returned to its routine, the echo of what happened there never truly faded. The white sheets, the broken cries, the whispered confessions of a 12-year-old girl. They remained etched into the walls, into the memories of every person who had been present that night. This was not simply a case of crime. It was a portrait of how fragile innocence can be, of how love, when twisted, becomes a weapon, and of how society must never turn away, because silence is what allows monsters to thrive. Yet, within the darkness, there was also a spark, a child reunited with her mother, a small step toward healing, and the hope that one day, the girl would no longer define herself by what had been done to her, but by the strength she found to survive. The rain stopped. Dawn began to break over the countryside, and as light filtered into the hospital corridors, it was as if the building itself breathed a sigh of relief. But the true story was only beginning beyond the hospital walls, in the quiet life of a girl and her unborn child, in a world that would test her, doubt her, and yet perhaps in time allow her to heal. This was her story. A story of innocence lost, but not completely destroyed. A story that forces us to question the meaning of love, of protection, of trust. And perhaps most of all, it is a story that reminds us that even in the darkest of places, there can still be a fragile light of hope. Write your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if faced with such a truth? How do you think this girl's future can unfold? We want to hear your voice. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe to Zimo Voice for more stories that uncover the hidden, the painful, and the powerful truths of our world.